Great. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Nicola Collister. Nicola was one of the first ever group customer experience directors in the UK and has 25 plus years in the service industry. Working her way up from an advisor with the RAC, Nicola went on to hold senior COO and CCO executive roles. Before then founding Custerian over 10 years ago with Simon Norie. Nicola is also an executive advisor for the CCA and chairs many of their events. She's also an NED and advisor to start-up and scale-up businesses. Custerian are a practitioner focused change creation and delivery company that helps clients improve profitability by solving problems, making things better, and helps businesses get the right stuff done through alignment of their people, process, tech and data. Nicola, welcome. That's some resume. How are you today?
I know it makes me feel old actually when you say those years. I should shave 10 years off really, shouldn't I? Say I've only been doing this for 15. But no, I'm great, thank you.
Plus.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I say 15 plus because it makes me feel too old as well. So let's get into this then. I'm really looking forward to talking to you. So Nicola, you've been working, as we know, we've just discussed, as a senior leader now and servicing it for many years. Why do you think so many businesses get change wrong?
It's really interesting actually, and you know what, I'm always interested in finding out more from organisations. That look, everybody's going through change, you know, some large change, small change, you know, COVID, and businesses had to change massively, you know, as a result of that. And I think, look, there's a whole host of things. Some talk about the cultural impact was too hard, you know, the leadership, the governance, the focus, resources, you know, it was too complex. I think another thing is lack of adoption. I think particularly with digital transformations. I was actually at a tech and AI conference yesterday with a lot of different public sector and private sector organisations, and you know, lots of CTOs were there, CIOs. You know, and they're talking about, it's great, we've got these digital products, but again, lack of adoption. So do you know what? I think it's a whole host of things, but ultimately, I think the biggest issue is that the change doesn't deliver the results that the business was hoping. So I think that's the biggest problem. I think if we look about the sort of the cultural aspects of it, because I'm also, you know, always very interested in the people aspects of change. And people resist change because they think they're going to lose something of value, or, you know, we're fearful of it, you know, in our own personal lives, you know, why aren't we quite doing that healthy eating, or, you know, quite doing a bit more exercise? You know, we're probably a bit fearful of it. It's because we've got to change what we're doing and adopt new ways. And you know, we all have all read the stories around, you need to do things at least, I think it's 7 to 10 times before it becomes a new behaviour. So I think when organisations sort of look at why it's gone wrong, it's because a lot of change, a lot of projects, it's more about the governance and the process, rather than perhaps enough time that's focusing on the people elements. We did a quick poll actually a good few months ago. And it was interesting in terms of some of the results, because 50% of people came back and said it was actually due to inadequate or poor change leadership. Right. 25% said it was due to the purpose and outcomes actually not being clear. 17% poor planning, and then 8% was lack of engagement or support. I was actually, again, it was at this conference yesterday, they were presenting, and I've read some of the big 5 consulting businesses studies, and again, they're saying sort of circa between 70 or 85% is again down to lack of clear goals and objectives. So actually you're not setting out in terms of the change with a clear purpose or clear objectives. They were saying second was insufficient investment, and then third was down to poor change management. And that change management does include, you know, it's not just how we are leading the project, you know, it's actually how are we engaging people, you know, what we're doing around that. So I think there was, you know, there's lots of similarities there between, you know, quick polls that we've done, conversations I've had, and some of the research that's out there.
Oh, that's really interesting, and thank you for sharing. And you know, there's so many key points in there, isn't there? So many ignore the people, and then the communication, and then, as you say, that purpose, that everybody's on the same journey, and that regular sort of emphasis to where they're going, where they're at, and why they're doing it, really. But it's so difficult, as you say, change. You'd think we'd know this already.
I know.
Yet so many go into it, half cocked, don't they? And it just doesn't deliver. And why do we do this?
I know, and it's as you say, I think it sounds really simple, but you know what? It's the one thing, it's I always say keep coming back to it. So be really clear about what is the purpose. What's the purpose of why we're doing something, and the outcomes it's going to deliver. So what's that problem? What's the opportunity? And for me, I think the biggest thing is it's then setting out that story, because that story, that purpose, and some of those objectives will mean different things to different people. I think back to different industries that I've worked in and have led either the operations or big transformations. And people in a warehouse are very different to those that are sat in merchandising teams. And yet all too often I'll see the same message being delivered to the same people, and you can almost see the people, in merchandising thinking, well, I don't know how that relates to me. And likewise, a picker and packer who do a fundamental role, for retail or merchandising organisations, supply chain organisations. They're sat there or stood there thinking, well, that doesn't apply to me. I don't even understand what that means. So it's really important that as part of that change journey, whether it's a small change or a large change, that you need to set that story out and really think about what does that communication mean, and how will that message land, with the person who's going to be consuming that message.
It seems to me that change, like almost so many things in business, needs a complete sort of just pull it right down to the very basics and rebuild it, because we seem to be just that older, if we do what we always done, we're going to get what we always, and it just seems that everyone's just doing the same sort of thing, and we're not really sort of transforming our change, how we do change, and that's what seems to be needed.
It is. It's funny, actually. I'll tell a quick story. I've become obsessed with. There's a guy on YouTube called Dan and it's Escape to Rural France. I will advertise him, but he's already got 500,000 subscribers in the matter of 6 months. And he's basically bought a chateau that was destroyed in a fire. So there's a massive transformation, and he's literally set out as a one-man band rebuilding this chateau. But, actually, it's not just about what he's doing, because you're almost going, that is impossible. This is an impossibility. It's going to take him 40 years to do this. But he's really good around telling the story, why he's doing it, the background to the chateau. Coco Chanel stayed there once. And so this is actually a really historic chateau. But he was completely destroyed. But it's incredible how he actually, every day now, people are obsessed. He's got 500,000 subscribers from around the world, of every walk of life, every country, who are just sat there obsessed now with his little daily 6-7 minute video log. Because it's not just about the chateau, it's how he's telling the story about the purpose. Why is he doing it? Why is he now literally going to invest his probably the rest of his life to rebuild this chateau? So I think, we probably all need to be a bit more Dan, I think, from Escape to Rural France.
Don't we indeed? I mean, I know we need to get on to the next question, but I think it was either yourself or Simon posted about the Barack Obama sort of interview with, and he was just saying, that get things done, isn't it? There's so many people that are just there's problems. They see the problems, they can all tell you about the problem, but obviously with this Dan as well, he sees the opportunity, and it, what is impossible? Nothing's impossible if we have the right will to do it, right? So
absolutely. And you know what I think, and I know, as you say, we'll move on to the next question. I think the other second piece for me, so that purpose and objectives, the other second piece for me is the change owner or the change lead. And it's, it's like the Dans of the world. And as you say, Barack Obama gets stuff done. I think for me, that's also and back to the research, lack of change leadership. Now, this is not the project manager. This is not the program manager or the program director. This is who is the business owner, the P&L owner, the person who's on the hook for those outcomes. who's that sponsor, that owner, who's absolutely going to be that champion. They'll break the barriers down. Do you know what? They'll really galvanize the team, because we know a lot of change is difficult and it has impacts for people.
Yeah.
So it's almost that change champion. And I think, often you find there's less than 10% of businesses, of senior leads, who will really stick their neck out, put their neck on the block for something that fundamentally might seem like, as you say, an impossible goal, and create a sort of almost like Project Possible. So I think that's for me, there's probably two. All the other stuff's important: governance, plans, the way that you're going to do it. But for me, I think it's that purpose and outcomes, and who's that, almost the change champion. Who is that person that's going to put themselves out there?
Yeah, fabulous. So is that where you think these are the key elements that are generally overlooked when planning change and transformation? Yeah. It's those key things, is it, Nicola?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, all the other stuff's important. Planning, part of that purpose and outcomes is about that engagement piece. Absolutely, you've got to engage people, and you've got to engage. And I say people because it's not just colleagues, it's contractors, it's partners, suppliers. So it's back to that change narrative. What's the story? What you're trying to achieve? What story do you want to tell, and how do you take them on that journey? So, and as I say, I know I'll come back to it, but Dan, who's single-handedly doing a Chateau up, he's incredibly, now got 500,000 subscribers who are literally tuning in every single morning. Yeah. I'm almost disappointed he's actually gone on holiday for 3-4 days, and I'm just, the poor guy needs a break, by the way. But he's almost hooked you into the story, and you know what? I think you don't often see that in businesses where people are hooked into, actually, do you know what? I'm excited about this. I know it's going to mean change for me, but I'm excited because I understand it. I'm part of this journey, and I'm hooked on, what that change story is all about.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, again, you posted some, and you mentioned it in this earlier Project Possible with the 14 Peaks and Nim's Purger, and that's a film I've watched 3 or 4 times. I think it's just amazing. But like with the Dan story again, and just if you look at what Nim's achieved, people would go to Everest and climb it the same way every year because that's how it had to be done, didn't it? Yeah. And he just ripped up the rule book, didn't he? What took people multiple years to do, he did it in a matter of months, just because he felt that it could be done. And I think, that's it, isn't it? That, as you say, so many leaders are sort of scared to put their head above the parapet and try something different, try something new, be really innovative, and fear of go and sort of not be frightened to fail, and we need more of that, don't we?
We do, and I think, as you say, you mentioned that one, absolutely. I spoke about that at a conference last week, and that was my headline, how I aligned it back to a story or a film, which I always like to do because we all like relating to stories, don't we, in films? Yeah. So, but yeah, what was really interesting, as you say, about the Nim story was, one of the mountains, one of his final mountains, was in China, and China had shut access to the mountains because of the weather conditions. But again, that, to anybody else, people would have just given up. I'm not going to fight the Chinese government. But he didn't, and that's where he launched his social media campaign. And basically, it wasn't a single man fight against the government. It was now everybody in the pressure on social media to say, this is an incredible, this is Project Possible, and therefore they opened the mountain and let him and the team climb it.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. It doesn't take a lot for us to get inspired, does it? We just need inspirational people, and that story, as you've touched on so much, I think. So thanks. So you recently posted on a subject, another one, we just follow each other, they have the power of social media, that I've been talking about, and I really wanted to get your thoughts on this as well. And, why customer service, contact centre, CX, etc., their inability to be seen as a profit value added function, versus that of a cost-cutting function. It seems the functions are always on the back foot and being asked to do more with less. We sort of had a little bit of sort of light in the pandemic, I think, and then it's sort of been snatched away, hasn't it? What are your thoughts on that, Nicola?
Yeah, do you know what? It's, as you say, it's really dear to my heart because it frustrates me. So I think it frustrates me hugely, and it's dear to my heart because these departments, particularly customer service, operations, contact centers, store-based customer, no matter what they are, those service functions are a crucial part of any industry. And as you say, I think I had a glimmer of hope, sort of as we went through COVID, because they were put on a pedestal. For some businesses, it was the only way those businesses were going to operate and bring in revenue. So, but yes, it seems like we've gone back to the old days pre-COVID. But do you know what? I think in a lot of cases, the answer is because the leaders of those functions are not selling it like that. They're not telling the story. There's so much focus of customers and their experience, contact points, friction points, et cetera, that we often forget that these things need validating. It needs to be financially viable. It needs to be, is it aligned to the strategy and the objectives? Is it aligned to the proposition? We're not just here to do what customers want. So, and that's not saying that things couldn't be improved, because they absolutely can be. And it's not saying that, we shouldn't be customer centric. We absolutely should be, but customer centric for what purpose and for what point? So, you know what, I think if seriously, if there's leaders out there, whether, as you say, they're a customer service leader, chief customer officer, CXO, etc., you've got to sort of create that value case. And I'll give you an example. Back to my days at the RAC and then in retail. One of the things that I did there is all the unnecessary contacts that were coming in. So not the sales-led contacts, the unnecessary, typically service contacts. What I did is ensured that, one, we had the data and the insights as to what was causing it, but then understood the cost to serve. So what's it cost us to have the ability to deal, or to have to deal with those, including complaints. And then what I did is presented that back to the business areas, who were the cost centre owners. It actually went one step further, that the chief exec then at the time said, well, these business units have got their own P&Ls. They need to be accountable for the friction that they're causing. So do you know what? Even though it was a wooden dollar exercise, you're going to recharge. I want your area to be zero-based budget, and you are going to recharge any goodwill gestures and the cost of dealing with that. And you know what? That drove a really different mindset then with the people that were managing, the patrols, the engineers. And I went on to do, again, it's a wooden dollar exercise, but it creates a different behaviour in the organisation to say most service functions don't cause that demand. That demand's caused elsewhere in the business. So actually now turn that on its head and create that narrative that says, yes, we could do some things that are more efficient and effective, and therefore that's what is our responsibility and our accountability. But actually, to drive more accountability in the organisation, it's about how do you again sell that narrative, and equally back that up with data and insight to do that. If you've got something that's revenue generating, so I did in retail organisations, we would still be taking, supporting online orders or taking orders from retail customers. So again, it was about proving that value. So, we were able to prove that we could increase the average order value of that customer because we gave more personal shopping advice and so on, versus those online orders. So again, created that value story as to why, the customer contact element, or that, contact centres at the time were a valuable asset, to support the online business area. So I think to answer the question, it's back to that. How do you use the data and the insights? But again, how are you presenting that as a value centre and value creation back to the organisation? And I think, I speak to a lot of service leaders and they're just not doing that. So it's seen as a cost centre. It's seen as well, how do you get your demand down? How do you automate stuff? How do you try and migrate, customers online to self-serve? How do you get your demand down? But as I say, in the majority of cases, 95% of this demand is not being caused by them.
Yeah, you make some really good points and some great examples. And I think this is part of the reason why much of the chief customer officer role is coming from,
Yeah,
sales and marketing functions, isn't it? It's that commerciality and that ability
yeah,
to talk more commercially. Whereas a lot of our customer leaders and, like you, I interview hundreds, if not thousands of them. It's very difficult to get to the value very often
yeah,
what they deliver. They just can't talk to it. And even under, I'm questioning them and asking them,
yeah,
and other than a CSAT uplift or an NPS or a
yeah,
reduction in X, it's very difficult to bring that in. It's a real skill that I think our service leaders need to
yeah.
sort of adapt and build on very quickly.
Absolutely. And I know, when I was obviously on, as you say, client side and executive teams, and it's a lot that we do now, working with sort of exec teams to help build that story and build that case for change, but equally also build how are you reporting? What are yes, critical touch points are crucial, but again, what's the value? What's the cost value equation attached to those? And I know I certainly think back, and I will always advise this if I'm doing any coaching or mentoring, is that, I spent at least 50% of my time influencing the business. And that influencing was telling that story. So, working with the supply chain colleagues to say, all those failed deliveries every single day is driving this demand. So what could we be doing to send more proactive messaging? Working with the merchandising teams to say, all of these queries are coming in because either the product information online's not there, or it's not to the depth that now customers are looking for. Or likewise, you do realise that product reviews are quite low here. So again, what you're doing to investigate that product. So it was a 50, I say at least 50, if not more, of my time was actually spent with business leaders, almost, trying to influence them and their objectives and their priorities with their teams. And I think that, for me is quite a shift probably from where some operations service, CX leaders are today.
Yeah, really valuable. Good, thank you. So, we know we talk a lot about diversity, and here we are, two female founders and business leaders in the market talking on a podcast. But what are your thoughts about the diversity agenda and how we can get more females into the boardroom and perhaps the CEO spot?
Yeah, I do. I think, I think long and hard about this. I was one of the first female leaders actually in the RAC many, many years back. Interestingly, the unions put a complaint in because said, how could I be a leader when I hadn't got an engineering background? So that was an interesting time all those many years ago. But I'm probably going to be a bit controversial here in that I don't think the whole quotas, actually now quotas and almost targeting, we have to have this diversity, on an exec or in our senior leadership team. I don't think the quota thing is right. I really don't. And in some countries, take South Africa, where there's a point system, it's just totally driving the wrong behaviours and equally putting the wrong people into the wrong roles. So, but for me, it absolutely should be about skills, capabilities, and experience. There are some fantastic female leaders, as there are male leaders out there, as there are from different diverse backgrounds. So, for me, I think diversity is absolutely important. And I think that absolutely does need to change. And it's good to see that that is changing. Do I think it's changing enough? No, I don't think it is. But I don't think it should be based on, quotas and numbers and targets that we're setting ourselves so that we can go out there and say, oh, X percentage of our board are female or X percentage are from diverse backgrounds. I worked in, as I said, I worked in retail for many, many years. And prior to that, sort of a very male dominated services business. And there was no female execs at the time and no female senior leaders. So, and that's interesting in a retail business that was actually for outsized females. I used to sit there and go, I'm not being funny, but how can, a bunch of white male men truly understand what an outsized female needs and wants are and at different, times of life? So I think, again, it comes back to, it should be what's right for the business, and it should also be what's right for the proposition. And I'm not saying you have to, totally match your customer base, but, there has to be, some understanding of what the business is trying to achieve, and equally what markets you're serving.
Yeah, I agree with you on the quota thing. I think for me, the biggest challenge is losing the talent because, I think we're really lucky in the customer market because I think it is very diverse. It always has been.
Yeah.
It's got a very low entry point. Anyone can get a role in contact centres or customer service, can't they, from any background, really, and can go on to do great things. So many CEOs, yourself, and others have come from that advisor pool, and that's still very much the option and available today. But I don't know, businesses, I mean, you'll know it more than I, as a mother, as a female, having to work at that level over these years in, as you say, a very male dominated environment. I think business, it's how they change to stop losing. There's a sort of level that women get to, I think, and not just women, diverse leaders as well. They get to and they just go, this isn't for me, because and I think business somehow has to change, that we're not losing this talent, so we're only left with those types of individuals that can work a certain way. I think that's quite important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does. I think it leads on to, what can businesses do to attract and retain more female leaders, or as you say, diversity in leadership. And if you think now we've got five different generations of workforce, in work today, we're one of the most developed economies. But we're reaching a stage where if you stand back, and I know it is complex and it's challenging because there's so many plates spinning. But it really is about, for businesses out there, it's about taking those considerations of different people, whether those people are female, male, diverse backgrounds, regionalities, you name it. It's just the considerations of those different people's needs. And I think it's for me, it's how are you truly marketing yourself as a business? And I mean, truthfully, not the, oh yes, the big glossy, here's what it's like here. How are you tailoring your working environments? And that's not just physical, that goes beyond physical environments. So how are you tailoring those environments? And as you say, how are you, in effect, just attracting different types of talents? I was recently in a discussion with an engineering client. And they, talk about, yes, we are, we're looking for female engineering leads. It takes me back to my RAC days many years ago. But actually and that's great. It's absolutely fantastic. I don't feel perhaps engineering businesses are doing enough to attract female leads, but likewise, are females going into that industry enough? But the other point was, they've lost a lot, as a lot of businesses have. Logistics lost thousands of drivers, through COVID, because people were going, do you know what? There's more to life than working 60, 70-hour weeks. So a lot of people took early retirement. Again, certainly engineering, utilities, lots of different industries. They've lost loads of incredible talent because people have retired early. Now, those semi or retired people actually probably only wanted to semi-retire. A lot of it was I can't do 70 hours a week. So you know what? Can I semi-retire? So I think it's back to, again, thinking about the different workforces and how are you attracting them, but also what's your operating environment like, and what could you be doing differently to have a more diverse talent pool?
Yeah, again, a really good point. I mean, the over 50s, we've lost so many of those in the last few years. But like you say, I think many of them are actually willing to return to work, but not how they used to.
Yeah.
So, and when business is crying out for talent, and, the experience at that level is significant, isn't it? They're at the peak of their careers, many of them. They've got to understand how they can attract them back in and how they can change, the dynamics so it works for both parties, I think. So another really good point. And I mean, what advice would you give, do you think, to aspiring female leaders, if they wanted to get on, or even businesses who want to attract and retain more? We've talked a little bit more to that.
Yeah, I think for female leaders out there, so or for any leader. So again, any young leader that's out there, or equally person who's thinking, I want to become a leader. I want to be a person who's leading teams or leading products going forward. I think it comes back to actually the point we started about projects and programs at the start. Actually be really clear about your own purpose. So, what are you setting out to achieve? And I know, again, it sounds like a cliche, but, set yourself some personal goals, because if you're not clear about what you want to achieve and don't set yourself some personal goals, then you know what, you're probably not going to do it. And I'll come back to, I know you talked about the NIMS film and obviously the Barack Obama story, but the other one is, I don't know whether you've seen it on Netflix, the Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
The Arnie, absolutely incredible. And it's funny actually, because I didn't think much of him before. I wasn't that interested. That was an incredible life story. And actually, he set out with a really clear purpose. I'm going to be the world's best bodybuilder. So, but it's about, so therefore, clear purpose and set yourself some goals. Those things can change by the way, because mine certainly did when I was in my early 20s to where I was in my early 30s. I think the other thing then is equally, what type of company do you want to work for? I really thought about that at the time. And it's not necessarily the specific company, but, the industry. But do you want fast growing? Do you want innovative? Do you want something that's really going to stretch your capabilities? So, do think about that in terms of the type of company. I think the other thing is, don't be afraid. So I think it's back to that, maybe back to the NIMS story. Do you know what? That was Project Impossible when he set out, and he created and called it Project Possible because he just had that, I can't, and his was failure of dying. So, and his team dying. But, again, don't be afraid. I think I speak to lots of leaders, and I don't know whether, again, some of this has just happened in the last few years where people are just like, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I'm good enough. I really think that's going to stretch myself. Well, you know what? We're probably not putting rocket ships on the moon. So just don't be afraid. Really, do stretch yourself, because you know what? I'm sure you'll do a fantastic job, even if it's only 90% of where you want to be. So I think for me, those are the things, clear purpose and what you want to do, what type of company. Don't be afraid. You know what? Just try something, because, ultimately, even if you only do a few things well, that's made a difference. And I think you'll feel a lot better for it.
Yeah, great advice, great points, thank you. And I think, as well with the Arnie, you look at him and Sliced alone, the amount of setbacks they had, the resilience they needed to get to that end goal. And as you say, just that bravery, really, just that, resilience and grit to keep going on, and they will get everything. It is going to go wrong. You are going to fall off the track, but just start again, learn from it and carry on. Fabulous. Is there anything else that you would add, Nicola? I mean, we've talked and we could talk and talk, I'm sure, but is there anything else you wanted to cover that we haven't discussed?
No, probably just that point, actually. You just prompted me there, Michelle. I think that learning bit, do you know what? Every day's a learning day. I went to an AI conference yesterday. Do I profess to be the expert in AI? Absolutely not. There's that many things that are scare stories out there at the moment. So I think, every day's a learning day. There's lots of things, listening to podcasts, reading things, going to things. And I think, again, probably just that, but, don't let yourself get taken off track or off course. I was thinking about this podcast today. I was just thinking about, a couple of things that stuck out in my time for feedback that I've had. And one was from an old chairman of mine. I had dinner with him one evening, and I said, is there anything I could be doing differently and should be doing differently? And it was interesting because his comment to me was I needed to talk more, discuss, debate and ponder. He said, because your problem is you get stuff done, Nicola, and that threatens your exec colleagues. So it was an interesting one for me to reflect on. And probably my final point is, do listen to advice, but you don't always need to take it. Because I thought back to my purpose, and I absolutely get, I do listen, I do ponder, I will consider things. But actually, I'm all about making a difference and about getting stuff done. So, you know, actually I wanted to stick to what my personal plan was and what's true to me. So it's probably, again, you know, do learn, do listen, but equally it doesn't mean you have to do what everybody is telling you. You know, stick to your course, because I'm sure it'll be the right one.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic words to end on. So thank you so much, Nicola. It's been a real pleasure, really enlightening session. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Michelle. Have a great day.
Cheers.